What do you say there? Beautiful day there. It's an amazing time as we come and find, continue to shine and realign and redefine certain things as we go through the stages. Welcome back to the Pranic Pages with Jerome Shaw, host of the Open Palm Podcast, motivator, meditator, coming at you as we take another look in this wonderful book. It's called A Year Without Food, from Maor, Exploring More. So I implore you, if you have not yet seen the introduction, you can go back on the playlist as we say this, and the playlist is called Pranic Pages. So as we're proceeding in this informal reading, we'll be touching on a few highlights here and there to become more aware. And thank you for daring to care and for listening. Why me? The question, why me, is actually the question, why should I be the one to try and get the word out? There are hundreds of other breatharians who can do it, but it seems that they are not interested in sharing it very much, or have simply been burnt by ridicule and misunderstanding. I can relate. I have asked myself this question many times. In the beginning, I found no answer, but after a while, I understood that I am not a typical breatharian. I come from a scientific world. My father is a physicist and researcher. I myself learned and mastered scientific concepts before I chose to combine them with a new spiritual way of life. I think this is what distinguishes me from others. This is my balance. I am a seeking person of extremes who pursues adventures and challenges in everything. Can you relate? Have you ever been a thrill seeker? I feel like some of us that find this way of living are definitely giving in that way. Even though most people think science and spirit occupy opposite corners of the room, I see them as one beautifully aligned truth that will in the future become our new way of understanding that our life on earth is an illusion. I am both right brain oriented, intuition, emotion, creativity, and left brain oriented, logic, memory, thinking. One of the many reasons I went into my breatharian experience was to understand it from a logical point of view, even when there is not always a way to do so. And as we know, that a lot of these things that we talk about seem very illogical, very irrational. I do not seek money or fame through speaking about breatharianism. I do, however, feel a great urge to share knowledge that will allow others to open their minds to the infinite possibilities which our illusion allows us. Hey, thank you, Ray. Understanding that a man does not require food to survive, or requires a ridiculously small amount of food, opens us up to an understanding of what and who we truly are. It shows us the triumph of human consciousness over physical reality and makes us second guess ourselves. The truth I have come to understand is not something that I will share here. I can only say the greater truth is far more complicated than any of us can imagine. Being a breatharian opens you up to accepting more possibilities. Information can be found in science, philosophy, and ancient history, but the greater truth can only be found within us and in our intuition. Don't you love the rendition of intuition, letting go of superstition as we stay on mission? God, the prime creator, as I see it, is present in each of us. Like the seed of a tree that contains all the information of the tree in order for it to grow. One human cell contains all the DNA required to duplicate a human body. We are the essence, the seed of God. God has created man in his own image. We are God and God is in us. God is us. It is not an external reality. We are all together God in a godly experience. We are the one in the one's path of expression. There are many explanations I could add here, but I want to focus on Breatharianism in this book. Worth taking a look. My reasons for wanting to get the word out are to open minds, to communicate with those who seek to know that this lifestyle is a possibility, to make us question what we have been taught by the world about who we are as humans, and to make us understand our inner strength and the true power we have as sentient beings. For me, being a breatharian is a part of my search for living a higher truth. I am also a seeker of excitement and challenges. I enjoy it when things get rough. So not having some flavor in my life is not that big a deal. When I really think about it, the experience of flavor disappears after a few minutes, while the gifts of the breatharian way of life remain. You know, it's like they say, no blame, no guilt, no shame. But that oftentimes we feel the feeling of eating seems fleeting, while the feeling of pranic living and fasting seems a little bit longer lasting. I question my life choices and my ideals frequently so that I can always remain objective and never allow myself to think that I know something absolutely. Everything changes, including scientific discoveries and my own character and will. One of the thoughts that crosses my mind when I think about these life choices is, what would I do if God had given me a choice before I was born? The first choice would be a life containing a variety of foods, and in that life, I would use my sense of taste more than my other senses. However, that life would have a short lifespan. The possibility of having diseases, less time for other activities, and a weaker connection with the divine would be the norm. The second life choice would be the opposite of the first. I would have to give up my dependency on food, miss out on many flavors and textures. However, I would live a longer and healthier life. I would have 20% more time, sleep less, and be almost disease and toxin free, and have a stronger connection with the divine. Which one would you choose? I want us to ask and question our lives to find the amazing, all-knowing spirit inside us and never forget that our eyes are temporarily covered from the absolute truth by the illusion we find ourselves in. We have chosen to forget, but our ultimate goal is to remember. So let us all wake up, my brothers and sisters. Wow, I feel church up in here right now. Lockdown for 8 days. In September 2013, I was invited to go on a well-known Israeli investigative reporting show. The researchers had found me while investigating alternative nourishment methods via the internet and had watched a few of my online lectures. At the time, I had an inner knowing that I would soon appear on a public platform for the world to see as a way to spread the word about my lifestyle. There were only 2 serious breatharians in Israel at the time, my guide and myself. My guide was a very spiritual man, and exposing this delicate subject to the mainstream required someone somewhere between the spiritual and scientific worlds. I was the perfect candidate for the job. By conventional standards, I was considered as normal as one would be, as one could be. The objections people could have had on the subject would not have been about my abnormality. Anyone exposed to the subject would have to search within for their own understanding and answers. For my own part, I felt it was a great responsibility and honor to be the one to represent this subject to a wide audience, especially because of the many previous misunderstandings I encountered when I talked to people who had never heard of Breatharianism before. And it reminds me of, Peter Parker, which is the alias of Spider-Man. He had Uncle Ben, who gave him a quote. And he once spoke that with great power comes great responsibility. And that actually responsibility is the response to the ability. The show is on my website, raymaor.com. I recommend you watch it so you understand a little more about society's amazement with the breatharian lifestyle. The website also contains other video links and information. Preparing for the show. Prior to the experiment, the team and I spent a few months planning the logistics and the setup required by the crew and myself. This included finding a proper location close enough so they could visit me on a daily basis. We found a doctor who would perform surveillance and manage the scientific aspects of the experiment and who took care of a few other less important logistical matters. I told the television crew that I was not 100% breatharian, that I did not wish to be, and I still drank. Most breatharians are like me, and we drink or eat small quantities out of choice, not necessity. I explained to them that I was going to lose weight due to not drinking, but unlike a person who has not gone through the spiritual process, I would not suffer weakness, dizziness, headaches, dehydration, or any other expected symptoms, nor would I become hungry or thirsty. The message was understood and the preparations continued. I told them the only thing that would probably bother me was being harassed by continuous interviews and blood tests. Blood tests have always been an issue for me. Draining my blood makes me feel incomplete, like someone is disturbing my energetic field by taking something out of it. I usually have issues like feeling weak or fainting when someone gives me a simple blood test. There was a third party to the experiment, a wealthy businessman who had started an internet chat with me a few months prior. He declared that breatharians simply cannot exist, and we arranged a one-sided wager of $100,000 to see if I could undergo the experiment successfully. At the time, I did not think about the TV people approaching me, so I did not take the bet too seriously. 100 grand. All right, man. After all, it was only a guy on Facebook chat trying to tease me. Luckily for me, a good lawyer friend pushed me into checking it out. I decided to meet him to show him I'm a real person and not some fake identity behind an internet wall. We agreed we would conduct a real experiment, including scientific research, with an objective doctor, and that it would be documented by a serious television show. At the time, none of it seemed to be or have any likelihood of manifesting. As a student of manifestation and having a deeper understanding of how life and our consciousness correspond with one another, I placed many positive intentions into the experiment. Smart. To that, I added unselfish reasons of raising global consciousness. I persuaded myself that life would show me the course that would eventually lead me to the prize, not because I deserved it or because of greed, but because I somehow knew both the exposure and the prize were in my life's path. A normal person does not place such a serious bet for no reason and out of nowhere. I still don't truly understand why the businessman placed that bet. Nevertheless, we signed a legal document 2 days before the experiment outlining the definition of its success. The criteria was that I would survive, that the composition of my blood would not change and be confirmed by doctors, and that I would not suffer any dehydration symptoms, and that my mental and physical condition would be sound. In addition, we decided on making the experiment 8 full days without food or water, which I was not accustomed to. As you can probably imagine, finding a doctor who was willing to take part in the experiment was an issue. All the doctors we interviewed said that what I was going to do was impossible and probably life-threatening. They were not prepared to participate in the experiment for fear of their licenses being revoked for non-humanitarian practices. The first doctor who was willing to participate received a notice from his medical association stating they did not approve of his participation. He immediately and without hesitation resigned from the experiment. We went through a few more candidates until we ended up with a well-known senior cardiologist from a main hospital in Tel Aviv, and he stayed on with us until the end of the experiment. Even though I lived on a few hundred calories a day at the time, and even though I had already done a 7-day dry fast myself, I did not want to take any chances. Representing something as significant as pranic energy to the public for the first time was something completely new, and I wanted it to be as perfect as possible. I felt a big responsibility being the one to carry it out. For months, I knew that I was the one who was supposed to bring the pranic living process to the public. I felt it coming ahead of time. To make sure that all went extra smooth, I decided to have pranic workouts. Every week, I had a 2-day dry fast without resting. Meaning, I had my normal schedule of working out, going to my job, making love, and other things a normal person does without consideration of what I consumed. I wanted to make sure that my body would raise my pranic intake to its maximum potential. I know that it sometimes takes the body a while to get used to living off prana, so in order for the process to go smoothly, it was better to do so ahead of the time rather than worry about doing it all during the experiment. Smart. It's clever. I only slept about 4 hours each night and woke up naturally with an abundance of energy. In addition, I felt excited knowing something great was about to happen. Don't you just love that? I adopted sunset sun gazing and Falun Gong exercises. Enter the sun. It was a very energetic time for me, even though I knew that I would have no problem doing this long dry fast. There were a few unknown factors. The main one was how I would deal with the stress, the constant provocations and interviews, the pressure of appearing in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and the potentially materialistic significance of winning $100,000. Dealing with different emotional pressures alone can cause unknown outcomes, especially when you are a breatharian. Now, this is one of the reasons why, these days it has definitely been my practice to not speak vocally or adamantly about my practice. When it comes to going a certain amount of days, I just kind of let it be how it is, that there's nothing to prove, therefore there's nothing to lose, right? Whereas I've seen many people that get caught up, when they proclaim to the public of what they're about to do or what they're about to go through, and how that actually can sometimes get in the way when you allow other people to put in their say, when you allow people to say what's okay or not okay, when their energy and their concern comes in, sometimes it's tough to keep going. So for me, I don't tell anyone. And that keeps my energy flowing. Any emotion can create unknown consequences as your emotional body becomes out of balance with the rest of the bodies, the physical, spiritual, and mental. The second factor was the blood tests. Apart from my personal discomfort, no one is supposed to do blood tests during a dry fast, as it torments the body and reduces the amounts of liquids in the body. In addition, the doctors did not only want one blood test, they wanted them on a daily basis. Apart from those two issues, I felt great. I even felt an inner guidance that my spirit wanted me to do the show. Too many good things were happening in sync for me to ignore them. I felt like I was getting assistance from above. So I did not really have anything to worry about. Feeling all that love with that assistance from above, I trusted the universe, and I felt obligated to myself and to my fellow human beings to bring more ancient understandings and knowledge out of the closet. I had several motivations, some egoistic and others altruistic. Simply put, the money was for myself and to raise global consciousness and awareness of our unique abilities. I am both spiritual and materialistic, and I found my balance in that. Thank you for your honesty. I am not ashamed to say I was interested in the money. However, I can say the money was not the goal. It was a bonus that came with the experiment. A few days before the experiment, the businessmen did not want to go through with it, and the producers asked me if we should continue our preparations. I told them clearly that the bet was not the reason we were doing it, and we should continue with or without the third party. Luckily for me, the businessman changed his mind at the last minute. I still don't know why he did what he did. An idea has come to my mind from a higher perspective that the money was used to make a stronger impression on the public, who are still mainly materialistic in this day and age. I understood more people would take the subject seriously if they knew an unknown contributor took it seriously enough to fund a scientific study and bet a large amount of his own cash on it. Another thought was that I would eventually invest some of this money in the greater good. I live in a world of abundance, and therefore I have invested a large part of the prize money into the development of 2 free energy devices that will benefit the rest of us when the time comes. The show. During the show, I was monitored by 8 cameras living in a bungalow rented by the production crew for the purpose of constant observation. I was not allowed to leave the general area of the bungalow. The 8 cameras were around and within the bungalow, which meant that I was monitored by at least 1 camera at any given time. The camera's visibility boundaries were shown so I could know my boundaries when I stepped outside. I also had a camera in the shower, in the toilet, and in the bathroom, and in the bedroom. The rules were simple. I was not to eat or drink for 8 complete days. I was not allowed to put my head under the water in the shower or wash myself above the neck at all. I was to always be visible through the cameras, to sleep with the lights on, and I could not step away from my marked limited area, which included the bungalow and its very close surroundings. Every day, I was to provide the designated doctor my blood for testing and diagnosis, perform some basic motor function tests, and give a urine sample. When I brushed my teeth, I used a marker to draw a horizontal line on the water glass and filled the water up to the line before I washed my mouth. I then spit the water back into the cup, and I finished brushing my teeth. I displayed the water glass to the camera before and after to prove that I had not swallowed any water during the mouthwash. Wow. Prior to the experiment, the television crew documented several interviews with specialist doctors about the expected results of the experiment. Based on their expertise, they expected me to last for 3 days before giving up. One of them expected to take me out by force on a stretcher 4 days in. They predicted that I would be seriously dehydrated, have a dry tongue, and have serious and problematic blood tests, mostly in electrolyte count, urea, HB, hematocrit, WBC, and more. They also said that I was risking my life and that my internal organs would not be able to handle the pressure. The first 3 days of the experiment were the easiest for me. I wasn't bored yet, and my motivation was running high. The process has never been about physical weakness, but about my mental attitude. Having previously done the 21-day process, I came prepared and had a good idea of how I was planning to spend my time. Unlike the challenging 21-day process, here I could have access to the outside world. I took my laptop on, which I pre-downloaded documentaries, and had my cell phone with me at all times. In addition, I was allowed to have a friend come by if I wanted. I only used that option twice because I had a fixed schedule to keep me busy. Every day I woke up, did some Falun Gong exercises to get more energy flowing through my system first thing in the morning. Every sunrise and sunset, I did about 20 minutes of sun gazing, followed by a half-hour meditation. After that, I retreated and did some artwork, drawing mandalas, making small copper trees, and other creative work. During the day, I watched a movie or a series, did plenty of meditation, and listened to online lectures. Now, hear this, because he's giving you his pranic checklist, right? He's using that energy. He's not being reckless. right? So he's doing Falun Gong, like Qigong. He's doing energy exercise. He's meditating. He's sun gazing. He's relaxing. He's spending time in contemplation. He's raising his vibration. And he also has forms of communication. He can have a friend if he wants to have some nice conversation, right? Or he can just pull up a documentary for some nourishing information. All of these methods have nothing to do with food taking room, but they are different forms of eating with the things we consume, right? And being able to attune and stay more in tune and harmony with nature. For after all, that is the ability that we've been given, and it is within our nature. Almost every night I had 2 appointments. The first was with the skeptical doctor who came to test my blood and try to talk me out of the experiment. The second was the television host who always attempted to create some drama to raise viewer interest. I liked both occasions because it made my days more interesting, I can imagine. But I was also very grateful when it ended and I knew I had the night to myself. After the 4th day, I suddenly started getting really appreciated and respected by the show host. Neither he nor the doctor thought I would ever make it this far, and they started realizing that something special was going on. The doctor immediately started speculating on his own terms and worldview about how this could be possible. He wasn't happy that the blood composition did not change over time and that no great physical changes had taken place in my body, as he had predicted. In his praise, I must state that he accepted the situation with scientific objectivity and did not try to explain or change his initial opinion. From the 4th day onward, everything went smoothly until the end of the experiment. I continued to have daily visits from the doctor who ran tests, took blood and urine samples, which he immediately sent to the lab. I had additional visits from the host and the television crew who were still astonished about how smoothly everything was going. They really wanted some drama and action. I'm sure that would have given them satisfaction. When the 8th and final day came, I was very excited. During the last 2 days, I actually counted the hours as I really wanted to get back to the real world and out of my solitude. Everyone came and we held a small water drinking ceremony. I was so excited that I cried in front of the cameras. It was such a pleasure. The whole experiment is documented and it can be viewed on my website at raymaor.com. In the end, there were 3 sets of motivations for doing the show. The personal motivation was to open up people's understanding and rid their skepticism about how our bodies work. I also wanted them to understand how the universe works and how our consciousness and belief systems influence our bodies, right? Like the law of correspondence, as above, so below. As within, so without. The TV show's motivation was nothing more than to make an interesting, dramatic show that would bring them more viewers and revenue. The businessman was all for the science. The only party that truly benefited from the outcome of the experience and the experiment was the show. Although I still feel that we did not focus enough of the show on the deep understanding of what breatharianism actually means for our world culture. What does it mean to say food is not really necessary? What does it say about us, our spirit, our current beliefs, and how this could deeply impact the world as we see it? Retrospectively, I did not have a clue how much that show would change my life. People started recognizing me in the street, asking to take my photograph and give autographs. He became a celebrity. I felt like the survivor of a reality TV show. It has opened up many doors for me and has given me the motivation to write this book, since knowledge of this lifestyle is still missing in the world. Other experiments. Before my own scientific experiment, there were only 2 other breatharians in the world who had allowed themselves to be televised. The first and most famous one is Prahlad, which we also talked about in Christiana L. Trian's book, the Pranic World book. The Indian man whom I mentioned in a previous chapter, his experiment took place in India and spanned 10 days of dry fasting under medical supervision inside a hospital. It was followed and acknowledged by 20 different doctors and published mainly in the East. Westerners did not take it too seriously because it was made in India and not in the West. The second experiment was a failed one performed by the well-known Australian breatharian Jasmuheen. Jasmuheen is famous for the book Living on Light, which gave breatharian lifestyle seekers a framework and guidelines for the pranic living process. Shout out to Jasmuheen. It took place on the show 60 Minutes, but the experiment failed after a few days of dry fasting. My own understanding from correspondences with Jasmuheen is that the failure was a setup arranged by the investigative reporter and his team to give breatharians a bad reputation and to discourage the breatharian lifestyle, presenting it as fraudulent. The show I appeared on was called True Face, and its host was a famous journalist in Israel called Amnon Levy. He is known to be very skeptical and a difficult man who usually finds any loophole in his researched guest stories. I therefore mentally prepared myself for criticism during and after the show. Known methods of light nourishment. There are currently 4 commonly known methods for becoming a light-nourished individual. The first 2 are practiced in pranic breathing, and the last 2 in sun gazing. The methods that I am most familiar with are the 10 and 21-day processes. The 21-day process is explained in Living on Light by Jasmuheen, already mentioned, who has told me several times that this method is no longer recommended. The success rate of remaining a breatharian after undergoing the 21-day process is approximately 10%. This is probably because the mental and physical shocks you undergo are significant and really turn your world upside down. In short, the challenges are great, and only the strong-willed survive. The third method, also discussed in a book by Jasmuheen, The Food of the Gods, takes several years to complete and combines a slow reduction of caloric intake, healthier eating, and climbing the ladder of taste. This begins with being a vegetarian, followed by being a vegan, all the way up to a higher level of taking in less physical substances. This method employs many different forms of meditation, and the emphasis is on take your time, do it right. I have personally read the book and felt that for me, the quicker method is preferable. Other methods pop up here and there. Some suggest simply reducing the amount of food we take in. Some are quick and some are slow. The latest one I heard is an 8-day method to reduce about 80% of your caloric intake. I am not sure that this qualifies as living on energy. Sounds mostly like fasting. The final method, the pranic living group initiation, was developed by a colleague and I in our search to perfect the other processes, giving participants more chances of success via support. We are currently delivering it in multiple locations around the world. Sun gazing. Many books have been written on sun gazing, which is better known in the world than pranic nourishment and breatharianism. I will summarize what I know in this section. Sun gazers change the way their bodies function to receive more light energy from the sun by gradually staring at the sun in a process that builds up over several years. A sun gazer stares at the sun either during the hour after sunrise or during the hour before sunset, or at both times. One starts with just 10 seconds per gazing and gradually increases the time to 45 minutes per gazing. This means approximately 270 sessions, reaching over 6,000 minutes of staring at the sun. Now, this is what one of my friends as well as HRM did. One of my friends, Jesse Tree, if you've ever seen Jesse Tree, he did that method to get up to the 45 or 44 minutes of sun gazing by incrementally increasing it 10 seconds at a time. Now, I myself didn't do this, so I wouldn't recommend the way that I did it, but I just kind of jumped into it. I started off, slowly, but not that slowly. I just kind of allowed my body, allowed my intuition, and allowed my inner vision to let more light in as it wanted to. It is done barefoot, staring directly at the sun. And I didn't have many rules, like I had to be barefoot, or I had to be on the grass, or I had to be in this, or it had to be that. I just kind of let it be what it was. And that worked out for me. The overall process takes about a year and a half, depending on whether the individual has time to see both sunrise and sunset. The type of climate they're in, their spiritual level, their belief system, and their unique ability to adapt all determine their progress. The 21-day process. The 21-day process was once the only breatharian initiation process, and it is the one I personally underwent. Chapter 14 of Living on Light by Jasmuheen explains this process in detail, although Jasmuheen no longer recommends it. The 21-day process is not easy and requires a long period of mental preparation before setting the target date. There are very few people who choose to do it immediately after hearing about it. Even after you have started the process, there is no guarantee that you will complete it. Although statistically speaking, those who start it will usually complete it as they go into it mentally prepared and are in the right state of mind. A breatharian guide is required because it is dangerous to do this process by yourself. I know a few people who decided to ignore most of the recommendations by doing the process completely by themselves, and all failed to complete it or went back to eating exactly one day afterwards, which I consider a sense of failure. The Pranic Living Group initiation I developed is much easier on the body and the mind than the aforementioned 21-day process. In the next section, I describe the Pranic Living Group initiation, and I also go into smaller details about which meditations are required to be done and when. Yet, I caution again, it is vitally important not to try to do the Pranic Living process alone. So pretty much he's saying, don't be trying this at home. And I'll definitely agree that there's a certain degree of energy and synergy that can be intensely felt when you're able to vibe with a tribe and have that feeling carry you and thrive, right? Feeling even more alive as you're raising your vibe, changing what's on the inside, So my process in the beginning wasn't a 21-dayer. It was actually, I believe, 8 or 9 days. And I was dry going in, so I was already 5 days dry. And then I came out dry. And that's when everything changed. You know, I was never the same, especially in the way that I think and the way I maintain. So if you'd like for this energy to be longer sustained, I would suggest getting around others. And with your sisters and your brothers, you know, you can find more growth. And it might even be easier than just taking an oath, you know, doing it alone, not to brag or to boast, but to realize at the end, it's pretty cool to have a toast, you know, to your friends, to see them again, and to realize in this journey, there is never an end. So thank you for listening and glistening, my friend. We'll take a pause, we'll take a breath, and we'll come back again. This has been Maor, as we're exploring much more, seeing the new stages with the wisdom of the ages. Come back next time for the Pranic pages.